People have often found it perplexing when I tell them I'm an American. When I'm asked where I'm from, I answer Philadelphia, or Pennsylvania, or if the occasion calls for it, the United States. But I'm then often asked, where were you born? If it's hard for people to believe I'm an American when looking at me, then it simply begs the question, what does an American look like? What does an American look like?
Good, Mike. It's a tough question. Could you give me a week?
I don't think that there's a physical look that would define someone as American. Definitely not looks.
You know, it's hard to tell. I mean, you cannot tell by the appearance.
I've been going around doing like these candid tests.
Yeah, sure.
The test I conducted consisted of 2 sets of pictures. There were 3 actors in one set and 3 actresses in the other. Among the actors were a Canadian, a Brit, and an American. And among the actresses were an Iranian, a Mexican, and an American. I went around campus and into Center City, asking people if they could spot the American in each of the sets, based off of the looks alone. Which one of these 3 men is an American? What is an American? Him.
I'm gonna go with him. I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
Chile Ejiofor? I think it's a trick question you're trying to ask me here. And which one of these 3 ladies do you think is American?
The left right there, yes.
This one? This one. Most American, I guess. I'm just gonna blindly pick.
Is this guy?
Ryan Gosling?
Ryan Gosling, in the middle, the one in the middle.
Maybe this one?
I would say him, maybe.
I honestly can't say.
You know what? I'm gonna say him.
I was gonna say him.
He doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes to be an American, that's what I'm saying. You know? So any one of these men could have been born somewhere else and came to America. But any one of these men's parents could have been somewhere else and had their child in America.
There aren't any cues, as far as I'm concerned, that help me figure that out.
Like, well, why is it difficult to pinpoint one that's an American?
Because there's nothing about them that indicates to me whether they're an American or not.
I'm gonna take a stab. I'm gonna take a stab. I'm gonna say this brother right here.
Yes.
This brother right here on the end.
Out of the 46 tests we conducted, only 8 people picked Aaron Yu, the American among the actors, while 11 people picked Dilshed Butsaria, the American among the actresses. I noticed an interesting pattern when I tested people on the actors. Most people immediately ignored Aaron Yu, the American, and only decided between Ryan Gosling and Chile Ejiofor for their answers.
It's interesting. I think about this a lot. One of my favorite historians is a man named Ronald Tataki. I used one of his books in one of my Race in American classes. And I'll never forget, in the beginning of his story, in the introduction of his book, he talks about an experience that he had in a taxi cab. You know, he's Asian American himself, and he's in the taxi cab and having a conversation with the driver, and the driver is, you know, is a white man, and he says, you know, how long have you been in this country? And he says, what do you mean? He's like, your English is really good. And he's like, you know, it's like my family's been in this country since 1850. You know, like they came to California, and I traced my roots back that far. And he actually says that this has happened to him numerous times. And it really made me realize from Tataki's experience that this is an experience that countless numbers of Americans must have had.
Americans much like myself, as I've been asked this question numerous times. So I met with a couple of Americans who were faced with the same question. Are you an American?
Yes.
Yes, I was born here.
I would say so. I was born here.
Yes, of course, I'm an American.
Are you all American too?
Yes, of course.
Now, has there been a point in your life where people
kind of doubted that you're American, or were like
many times for me.
So they're just like, you're American? Like, are you really born here? And they just don't believe it.
Or when I say, yeah, I'm American. Oh, how? You just got your citizen? No, I was born and raised here.
And in my entire life, I've gotten Moroccan, Armenian, Siberian.
Sometimes people think I'm like from the Philippines or something.
They're like, whoa, so what's the culture like in Vietnam? I'm like, I don't really know, because I was born here.
One time when I was working, I even had a gentleman who was arguing with me. He insisted that I was from the country Ghana. I kept telling him, sir, I am American.
And then he'd be like, oh, okay, but your English is really, really good. No accent. Oh yeah, that's surprising. That's supposed to be surprising. I was born and raised here. I'm going to speak perfect English, even though my parents might not speak perfect English.
I think about my own family background. I mean, my grandmother was not born in this country, you know. So, I mean, Tataki's family has been here longer than my family has been here. And yet he has to explain why his English sounds so good.
I brought up the pattern I noticed during the test where people were ignoring Aaron Yu.
It must be one of these two. They immediately excluded him out. So, like, well, why do you think that was? Why do you think they just kind of shoved him away and just only considered these two American?
For broader, like, geopolitical reasons, up until, you know, maybe 100 years ago, there just weren't that many Asian Americans. You know, they were, for the most part, the first Asian American immigrants, and large numbers came over, you know, towards the end of the 19th century to work on the railroads out west, and that was really our first influx of Asian American immigrants. When you think American, there's not as much of a tie to the Asian American identity for a number of reasons that date back to prejudice against them. I believe coming out of both their work on the railroads and then, of course, World War II.
You'd see like Asian people sometimes if you watch Walt Disney, Asian stereotypes, and you would just assume that that's foreign.
It depends on which race has more presence within like American culture. I personally feel that Asians don't have that kind of presence.
According to the polls in the majority, like, you know, a lot of suburban areas, you know, things like that, like people know Americans as maybe white or African American, and they don't really assume any other ethnicity could be American.
It'll take time for Asians to be like, you know, looked upon as American and not like Asian. You know what I mean?
There are lots of Asian Americans, 5%. It's growing, right?
I noticed another interesting pattern when I tested people with the actresses. As most people who picked Mexican actress Cecilia Suarez felt that she was American because of her light skin complexion.
She's Mexican, right? She's American, but the majority of the people for this picture set, they picked her. They said she's American. And
lighter skin?
They said skin color. They said skin complexion. Well, why do you think they kept saying she's American because she has lighter skin?
You know, when you think of an American male, there are a couple different possibilities as to skin color, but I think the general social construct of an American female tends to be a light-skinned woman.
I have to say, it's just the simple European aesthetics. What's accepted in normal society is that a white woman or a woman with more European features, particularly not of the Southern European features, but more of, you know, Spanish, British, and French. Those type of women are the ones that are usually sought after. And so that is what the basis is of our American ideals in terms of aesthetics.
Skin complexion should not define like where you're from, to be honest, because just because you have olive color or tan color skin, like,
yeah.
It's like I can, you know, not that I can list every single country, but I'm sure that there's like over 50 countries that have people that are from there that have tanner or darker skin colors.
Yeah.
I feel like the problem is that in American culture, we have this idea of we have this ideology that, you know, to be an American you have to be white and you have to just look like normal, basically.
And what's their definition of normal?
Which I know I don't really have one.
Being white, being the light skin, being, you know, that kind of person.
Because majority of Americans are white in that skin color, and so everybody just jumps towards that when they think of America, and they don't consider other.
But why?
Culture, media, it's all part of it.
It's all part of it.
Like, I figure, like, if you're Irish, you know, you're natural born Irish, and you come to America, and people look at you, they're going to automatically think you're American because, you know, you're light skinned, you look white, and that goes back to the dominant ideology.
It's sort of the definition of white keeps changing. You know, I mean, 200 years ago, Irish people weren't white, and now, like, no one thinks twice about putting like a redheaded person in the white category.
You know, the real white, there used to be just, you know, WASP, you know, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And now the Irish, Italians, they are considered not as white, and then really not as white as some, you know, Scandinavians, right? So that's small differences in the skin tone. You know, there was a huge issue at the beginning of the 20th century.
The real absurdity comes down to the issue of the American census, you know, where people have to list their race. And every 10 years there's this incredible juggling act that goes on about, well, you know, what race are you, you know, and because as people intermarry, as more and more people do, the question of what race you are just doesn't make much sense for a lot of people.
If you're talking about where I'm from in New York City, the standards for an American male are way different from when I went down south to Florida.
Okay, although America stresses that men and women are equal, they don't feel that way because for the most part, a lot of CEOs and elected officials are male.
I'm not an immigrant, so I don't have that experience, but I think an immigrant, if they want to be an American, citizenship would be a part of that.
Does it really matter if you have a citizenship or not? Like if you're living here and you know how to live here and you can mix in and mingle with everyone else who lives here, you're technically an American.